You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Omlor, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Omlor International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact. Welcome to our wonderful guest on Business Wealth Impact. We have Frank Iglesias, who is a real estate entrepreneur who has done business in multiple states for over 15 years. He's done hundreds of deals spanning a variety of strategies in wholesale deals, fix and flips, rentals, and new construction. Welcome, Frank.
Thank you, Jeanne. How are you doing today?
I'm doing amazing. And you?
Wonderful, wonderful. I appreciate you having me on. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, I really wanted to have you on because I'd love for you to riff on all these deals you've done. And I want you to give some insight to people on what's going on in real estate at the moment, what kinds of deals they should be doing, and how to ensure that they get the best deal. So first of all, why don't you let us know what got you into real estate in the beginning?
So I was interested in real estate for many years prior to actually getting in. I was an IT professional prior. And people in my family would talk about it. So it was kind of interesting, but nobody actually did anything. And so I'm just going along in my IT career. And one day I get an email from Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I don't even know how I got the email, but it sounded intriguing. Hey, go for a couple hours, whatever. And so I was like, sure, we'll go. So went to this, I guess it was a couple hours seminar. And it was like, wow, I had no idea. Up until that point in my life, I thought investing was, stocks, bonds. I didn't even know what IRAs were, right? It was just stock, your typical securities. And so it was kind of and so I told my wife about it, and she was like, huh. So then that led to me going to a 3-day event, because now it was very interesting. And, we had this loose interest. So I was like, okay, now we have something to latch that interest to. And, as it happens with so many investors, the 3-day event then turns into buying courses, which led to roughly 4 or 5 months later buying our first property.
So you were hooked from that point.
We were. And the irony about this is when we started, that first seminar I went to was in the middle of 2008. It was maybe a couple months before the crash that fall. And I don't remember if the 3-day event was before or after the crash. But I do know it's January 2009, I bought my first property. And we were thrilled because we're like, look, we spent $55,000 and buy a house. Houses are cheap. That's awesome. We had no idea that the world was melting down in terms of real estate. I mean, I would go to work and they'd be like, hey, the stock price of the company's down. Make sure you do a good job so you keep your job. But beyond that, I couldn't relate to this idea of the real estate market is tanked at that point.
Okay. Now, what's interesting is that we were chatting privately before, and you said people have no idea what the real deal is, no idea. So I want you to start unpacking what you meant by that. What's the real deal of what's really going on and what to do and what not to do?
Okay. Yeah. So what I have found over the years, and I ran group meetings of investors for years, and a lot of people are sold on real estate through one of two channels. One, there's the TV shows, which they're great shows. They're fun. They're entertaining. And they portray maybe 1% of what really happens. And so it's not that they're not telling the truth. It's such a tiny portion of the whole picture. And then the second thing is people get in usually the same way I did, right? You go to a class, a seminar, you sign up for classes and so forth. You pay a lot of money. Back when I started, it was like $15,000. Nowadays, I hear it's $25,000, $50,000, and who knows what else. But you usually see in a lot of these seminars the vision of what your life could be. And so maybe you see the cars, the jets, the beaches, whatever, the ideal life, the perfect family portrait that, you would put on a massive poster anywhere to be proud of, all those things. And there's nothing wrong with all that per se. The problem is people feel like by getting into it, and we live in an instant gratification society, right? Like we know that we all have our phones, we get information so fast. The problem is real estate is a slow moving vehicle. It's not like a stock where I could just, oh, look, the stock price doubled today, sell, and the money's in the bank in 24, 48 hours. Real estate just doesn't work that way. It's a slow moving vehicle. Even if you're a wholesaler, which is a quick moving vehicle, it's still very slow compared to selling a security or something of that nature. And so I tell people, when you're in real estate, you have to know that you're playing the long game, because it's a long game sport. And in that sport, there's going to be ups and downs. Real estate, it's really a long-term journey. And in my experience, most people get in or gone within a year or two because they hit some tough spots early and they're like, forget it, I'm out. And I'll give you the most common example. Homeowner wants to sell their property, but they can't get their price, whatever it may be. So rather than sell it at a discounted price, whatever that is in their mind, they're going to be like, I'm going to be a landlord. It's probably the number one example. Hey, they got to move, job relocation, whatever. But they don't have any problem with their house, so they don't want to give it away, quote unquote. So I'm going to be a landlord. And I can't tell you how many calls I lost count several years ago where I will talk to that seller. Within a year or two, they're done. They're like, being a landlord, this is not for me. All of a sudden, they got to fix the house. They hired a bad tenant. The property manager didn't do what they're supposed to, and on and on and on. And they went into it thinking, well, I'll just be an investor by renting my property.
Right.
Or we replace, a second example would be replace the homeowner with, now I'm the new investor who took a course. I learned a few things, so now I feel like I own, or even worse, I went to YouTube University, which is good to a point. But the problem is real estate's a game where you don't know what you don't know, and what you don't know can and will get you into trouble, and trouble usually comes in to the tune of, if you're lucky, thousands, if you're unlucky, 10,000s, if you're really unlucky, hundreds of thousands.
Right. Okay. So I love all that high view of it. I want brass tacks. What are some of those secrets that you were alluding to on our last conversation? You said, Jeanne, if people knew what really goes on, what they really should be doing, I'm like, let's talk about that.
Yeah. So a few things. So we'll start at the most fundamental thing is, what do you want out of this thing called real estate investing? You'd be amazed how many people just get into it and they don't even really know what they want. They saw something external that was attractive. Again, the family portrait, the car, the house, whatever. But when you ask them, and I can't tell you how many times I go to people and say, what do you really want? And they're like, well, I just want financial freedom. Great. What does that mean to you? Or they'll say, the latest buzzword is generational wealth. Great. What does that mean to you? Most people don't really know when it comes down to it what they want. They really don't. It's it's intellectual, but it's not in their core. And when they get to their core, they're like, gee, what is the point of all this? So you got to start there. That's like that's the base fundamental. What do you really want? Because if that's not clear, you can go down the real estate rabbit hole and you could spend years in it and several years later be like, what am I doing? Why am I even doing this?
Right.
So that's like step one. Step two, get a coach. You've got to have a coach. And you can't be afraid to make a mistake or spend the money, because the money the coach will save you is pennies compared to the cost of the mistakes.
Absolutely. I agree.
And I'm like,
I'm a coach, so I agree with you.
Get a coach. Yeah, you think about every business. In sports, you have professional coaches. In business, you'll hear things like board of directors, advisors. So why would you as a business owner not get a coach? Like, it's just mandatory. It's not mandatory, but it should be.
Right. I'm on your side. I agree with you. Also, in any business, not just buying real estate, You're wasting
Yes.
time and money not knowing what you're doing, and the coach will not just save you money, they should be making you money,
Yes. And one
right?
of the things
Yeah.
that coach will do is you got to know if you're getting into real estate, because you ask what happens behind the scenes. The best way I could sum it up is loads of adversity. And why is there loads of adversity? Well, first of all, life is not a cherry walk, right?
Hmm.
There are challenges in life, but real estate, whether it's residential or commercial, it's not like the most regulated business in the world, per se. In fact, far from it. And so you're really just dealing with people. And so one thing I tell people is if you're going to be a real estate investor, you really need to become an expert at people. And
Mm.
unlike when we were young and we learned how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, maybe we memorized a multiplication table, right? Oh, I can do 11 times 11 is 121. I think that's still correct. So,
Mm.
right? People are not that way, right? People don't come with an owner's manual. Problem solving doesn't come with an owner's manual. And so we have to really understand that when we invest in real estate, the houses is actually the easy part.
Hmm.
80% of the effort has nothing to do with the actual house. It's
Mm.
the people you're going to deal with.
Hmm.
And so I was very introverted in my past. So I was a former IT. I didn't have to talk to a lot of people, quite frankly.
Right.
So when I went into real estate, it was like every day I was not in my comfort zone. My wife would tell you, oh my gosh, you can't even recognize how I used to be versus today. Get on
Hmm.
a podcast 15 years ago? Absolutely out of the question. So, and you've got to be comfortable not only talking to people, confronting people, dealing with conflict, and not only dealing with conflict and confrontation, but looking at these things as these are positives.
Mm.
Like if somebody's been out of shape with us, that's good because at least I know they care.
Right.
The worst is when you hear nothing. That's like the worst, right?
Hmm.
So a lot of the things that you need to do to be good at real estate really have nothing to do with the house itself. The
Right.
house, quite frankly, is the easiest part of the entire equation.
However, if you don't buy low enough, that is not the easiest part of the equation, and it isn't always easy to find a low enough price that it's going to
True.
be a feasible investment. So it's always about buying low. And I feel that just getting that deal is the first hurdle. That's the first hurdle. Because no matter how good you are at people, if you don't buy low enough, none of that's going to sort that out later on, right?
So potentially, because if you buy with the intention to hold long enough, you
Mm.
could outlive the mistake.
Mm.
You can do that, but it just may take a few more years than you intend. But I'm glad you
Mm.
brought this up because, and I'll sum up with a current client I'm working with. He wants to learn how to build houses. Great, we'll do it. Well, what he's finding is he can't find a property to buy low enough yet.
You mean the land?
Correct, the land. And
Right.
so I said to him, so he was getting frustrated. And I understood that because what he was realizing is we got to get the acquisition right. Because once you buy to build, you're going to be in that thing for 9 months, a year, whatever. It's
Mm.
not fun to work on something for 9 months to a year or even longer and break even. It's not a fun thing. So
Not
I
at all.
said to him, I said, we can loosen the standard that I taught you. And if you want to do that so you can buy a deal sooner, we can do that. But I need you, since you're paying me to teach you, I need you to agree that you're going to be okay with either small at profit margin, break even, or a loss. So if you're okay
Right.
with that, then we can loosen up what I taught you.
Right.
And he said to me, no, I don't want to do that because I just did that on a rehab I did where I worked on it for 9 months and we
Oh.
made money, but it didn't feel good when we closed. Like he was glad they closed. He made a little money, but he didn't feel great about it.
No, because it was way too much work for what he got out of it. So it was
Exactly.
not worth it. So what is your standard? Is your standard just wait until you wait until you wait until you get that piece of land that has the right price?
Yeah. So the standard we use is twofold. One is you have to understand up front, be a disciplined buyer. Be a disciplined buyer, because it's very easy to convince yourself you should do a deal that you shouldn't do, because it'll be like, well, it's kind of close. So your brain starts figuring out all the ways you can tweak it to quote unquote make it work. Whereas if you just stick to your standard, which is usually going to be in writing, then you can be like, you know what, I understand it's close. What we really need to do is, instead of compromising our standard, we need to simply learn to negotiate better. And if we negotiate better, one of two things is going to happen. Either we're going to get the deal or find a happier place where now the deal does make sense, or we're going to have the discipline to say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I realize we're close, but we're just not quite there. So it's not a fit for us at this time. But if you should change your mind, you have my number, and being okay with that.
Right. To walk away.
Yes. The ability to walk away, even if you're close. To some people, like, man, we're so close. Don't let it die. If it doesn't check all your boxes, again, it's the idea of don't settle. It's so easy to settle.
Right. There's that idea that there is always another deal that's going to come along. They're like buses.
Always. There will always be another one. Yeah, I mean, and like, I'm in the Atlanta market. We are growing. So it's not like something's not going to be available tomorrow.
Right. Yeah. So I do think there's this FOMO with all investors or all investments of, oh, I'm never going to get a deal like that. So that's interesting that you're working with somebody on a new build right now, because I have some questions about that. What are some things right now that people need to know about building new structures right now, homes?
Yeah. So right now, one thing you need to know is construction is expensive. Just in the last 5 years, our costs to build a property have gone up roughly 65%. Now, this varies depending on what you're building, but like your average, call it $500,000 or so home in Atlanta, 65% increase from 5 years ago. That's a lot of money. So, and 5 years ago was not that long ago. So it almost feels like yesterday. So from an emotional perspective, it's like, man, why, it shouldn't be this much. It was like yesterday. Well, it was really 5 years. And so deals that look good in our memory a short time ago, all of a sudden don't work. And so we're actually having to buy more conservatively. Again, going back to that discipline. So construction is more expensive. A second thing you need to know is you will see people buy properties based off the comparables. Very typical when people buy a structure that's already built. There's already a house there, comparable houses, perfectly fine. That is not nearly enough information when you're doing new construction. Because in new construction, there's a lot more variables. There's design work, there's site work, planning work, zoning work. There might be neighborhood work, historic work, who knows? And all those variables can vary wildly. So you might look at a piece of property and go, oh, well, everyone else is paying $100,000 for land. Great. That doesn't mean it's going to fit the formula you need to be profitable. You might be looking at a scenario where everybody's paying too much for property. This is actually not uncommon in our market because they're using old formula or insufficient data is the most common thing. Insufficient knowledge of everything that's really going to go into getting from A to Z for that project. And so you end up building a property, and at the end of the day, you're like, well, heck, I'm only breaking even. Or maybe I'm right?
Right. Well, I know developers that have stopped developing. They've stopped developing because they said it's just not worth it right now. So would you say that getting into developing and building, would you say that's where people should be right now? It sounds like it's not a very good deal right now.
It all goes back to acquisitions. It all goes back. So, if you're going to go buy a property that's off the MLS, it's going to be tough to succeed right now. Property is expensive, inflation's high. But what it really comes back down to is acquisitions. Can you negotiate a good enough deal up front to offset all the costs you're going to have to spend? Truthfully, that can happen in any market, whether it's up or down. The reason developers are not building now, and I agree, there's a lot of properties 100% are not worth developing. But it's not because the property is not worth developing. It's whoever owns that property is unwilling to part for it at a price that's going to make sense.
Right, because if it's 65% more to build it, that's a lot to build in on the deal at the beginning to offset that cost later on, because the true 65% more for the construction, you would have to get that land at a really deep discount to offset all of that, correct?
Correct. And you'll hear people say things like this, like a quote unquote rule you'll hear a lot of times is you shouldn't pay more than 10% more for the land than what the project's sale price is going to be. And maybe as a very dirty, and I want to emphasize very, very dirty formula, you could play with that. But we have found that to be woefully inadequate. What we have found is we have to have a formula that truly lays out all the variables, that has a little bit of flexibility to really figure out what's happening. So going back to the person that I was talking about earlier, when I taught him the formula we used, he literally came back to me the following week after exercising it for a week. He goes, Frank, like 90% of the stuff I was looking at doesn't make sense anymore.
Right.
And I said, that is correct. That is exactly the lesson I wanted you to learn.
Okay, awesome. So in this now, not a year ago, now, what do you feel if somebody wants to invest in real estate? What do you feel is the best way to do that right now?
Best way to do that. So I'll give you two answers. The first answer is invest in the type of real estate, first and foremost, that aligns with your goal. And I say that because I've seen people try to get into new construction where their goal is cash flow. Probably not the best route to go.
No. Okay. So for cash flow, you would say buy and hold, buy rental properties. Is that what you would say for cash flow?
Yeah, I would say learn to be a master at acquisitions of properties that can generate the cash flow you seek.
Okay.
Now, if they know my passion is building, great. Or their passion is I want to fix and flip. Because the reality is flipping, building, renting, all of it works today. None of it doesn't work. The question is, which are you in alignment with to meet your goal? And two, what they are. Flipping, building, renting, all they are exit strategies. So it's kind of weird to think of it, but if I build a house and it's a year project, it's a 1 year exit strategy. The real work is, can you buy? So the old adage, you got to buy right. There's not enough emphasis in real estate investing. How do you really buy right? And that's a discipline. And the thing is, if you can master acquisitions, you can do whatever you want.
I agree. I have been harping on this for a while, that is the key, is the acquisition, buying at the right price. And people gloss over that. And I say, but no, wait, we need to look at what is because I've made mistakes myself on that. I learned the hard way. And the first big disaster that I did, I bought something I shouldn't have bought. And just by the grace of God and praying a lot, I found the one buyer that gave me what I paid for it because they had to be in that area because they were building their dream house. And it was the only place they could buy. So they literally had to buy it from me. That was just providential.
Wow.
I would have lost 2/3 of that property because I made that stupid mistake of buying at a sheriff's sale. I didn't know what I was doing. And I learned the hard way. That's the key, is to buy the right property at the right price. Because after that, you can't fix it unless you have a miracle happen like I had. A lot of praying happened to make that work. And by the way, I was so grateful. I turned around and I changed the contract, and I gave them a $2,000 bonus for taking the house off my hand. They'd never seen that behavior
Wow.
in their life. They'd never. I said, I'm just so grateful here. And the title company was like, you want us to change the contract and give them $2,000? I said, yes, I'm so grateful. I'm giving them $2,000. They said, okay. They'd never seen that before, but that's how grateful I was that they took that house off my hands.
And that's an amazing story, what you shared right there, because it's true when you're dealing with a lot of people in this business, going back to people, it's not a business where you see a ton of gratitude.
Mm.
So I wasn't surprised by when you say that. It's like, oh my gosh, you actually did that.
I
I
did.
can relate to that experience. Yeah, it's
I
a
was like,
beautiful thing.
They saved my life. I had just even one more weekend of stress and I told my brother, he said, I would have done the same thing. And then somebody else said, why did you do that? I said, because they just took all this stress off of me. And, and they had, they were developers. They had a lot of money, but they said, sure, we'll take that. They said, sure, we'll change the contract. And they couldn't believe it. But to me, I was just grateful because that was such a headache. And it was months where I was just like, had a lockbox, just praying. And I thought, just let everybody traipse through that house. And luckily it was very well positioned, had a big backyard and was right across from a park. So, and they could go in and they re-gutted it, everything. And then they were building, it all worked out for them. But, I thought, I just feel so grateful. I'm just going to give them, they didn't need the money at all. I mean, $2,000 was quite a bit for me then, but I was so grateful I didn't lose 2/3 of it. And they thought that was amazing. They said, wow, we have never seen this happen before. I said, thank you. You didn't try to negotiate. The woman said, this is what she paid. We're going to pay her what she paid. Didn't, nothing. So thank you. I think that the gratitude goes a long way with all dealings with people. That's what I think.
And you know what this really alludes to is why you can't be afraid to negotiate, because far too often when people are selling real estate, whether it's sellers or realtors, everyone's always selling price. Like that is running away the number one thing. Like if I made offers of 10 listed properties today, just as a random example, and let's say I know they're all too low, I guarantee you 9 of the 10, maybe 8, at least 8 are going to come, oh no, they would never consider that price. But rarely do people sell because of price. And like your story is a perfect example. There's always a reason behind the price. There's always a reason behind the number. And so and part of learning acquisitions is, how do I figure out how to get to that reason?
Right.
Whether it's a listed property with an agent, or I'm working direct with a seller, or I'm working with a wholesale. It is astounding. I get probably 100 emails a day from wholesalers, literally.
Yeah. You know what I understood? I understood something. Value is value for different people. Everybody has a different value. So when people were coming in and going, oh, you shouldn't have bought this, I'll give you 1/3. I'm like, no, I won't take 1/3, because I cannot take 1/3, because I need this money back, because I had no money. I was in deep debt and I made this big mistake. And people were like, why did you do that? I thought I was going to flip it. I didn't know what I was doing. And I said, nope, can't do that. And they said, oh, I'll give you this. I said, nope, nobody's ever going to pay. I said, yes, they will. Do you know why? They said, why? I said, because I'm not selling until I get exactly what I got back for it. That's my price. The reasoning was, I need to just flip it for the same exact price for somebody that can do the work cheaper than me, which is what I did. And I thought, I just need that one person. Sure enough, they needed the property for a personal reason. And that's what I was looking for. And I held out, I stuck to my guns. I said, that's the price. Oh, nope, that's the price. Oh, that's okay. That's the price. And I just waited and prayed and let the whole of Cincinnati, it was in Cincinnati, Ohio, I let everybody traipse through that home with the number of the lockbox. Every single, and there were real estate agents that felt so sorry for me. They were just trying to get people in there. They said, we're going to try. This one woman was like, oh my goodness, I'm just going to try to get somebody to buy this from you. So I had a lot of goodwill, because people could see, oh my goodness, why did she buy this? And my price was emotional. I need that money back. Okay.
Yeah. And that's the key word.
That's it.
That's the key word. There's an emotion behind the number. And if we can get to that emotion, we can figure out how to build a deal.
Right. And that is why they paid me, because the woman saw that. She said, no, we're not going to negotiate. She paid. This is what she needs. She saw the situation. She goes, we are going to pay her that. And the husband was like, it's not worth it. She said, it's worth it to us. And that is what she paid. She's not trying to even make any money on us. She's just trying to become whole again. She got it. And so then when I turned around and gave her the extra money, she was like blown away. And I said, thank you for not trying to, do what everybody else did. You got it. Here's $2,000 for your trouble. And she was like, thank you. The bonus.
No, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
So I learned a lot with that mistake. And I learned, do not buy unless you're absolutely sure that you're going to be able to make a good deal out of that.
Absolutely. And if you're on the other side working with a seller, and it sounds like some of these agents know, so to their credit, that's awesome. Because I was referencing wholesalers a moment ago. You'd be amazed how many times I call wholesalers. They're like, all right, here's the price. Here's da, da, da. Okay, great. Why is the seller selling? I don't know. Well, I already know the odds of this becoming because I don't know what problem I'm solving, because I know it's never the money. It's what's the reason behind it.
Exactly.
What's the emotion?
I always ask that. Why are they? No, I need to know. I'm the same. I'm not experienced like you, but I know enough to know about human motivation because I was an actress. Okay. So it's all about, and I'm a coach. I always say, why are they selling? I need to know. Why are they selling? What is their motivation in selling this? It was like, oh, it's on the market, but they don't care if anybody buys it. I'm out of there. They're just a tourist and leaving on the market just to see. And you see that with houses that have been on the market for 3 years and the people are still living there. They're just seeing if somebody by accident is going to pay them 3 times what their house is worth. Right?
Yeah. And even in those scenarios, we of course don't want to really spend time on those deals that there's low motivation. But I always still ask the question, okay, well, they're just seeing why. Well, why are they seeing why? Because if there wasn't at least of a hint of a reason, they wouldn't have even bothered putting it out there. Right. Now, yes, they're low motivation. Yeah, the likelihood of success is low. But let me flip that for a moment. Every now and then, you do come across that person that was not planning to be a seller, or they were they had low motivation. And just by asking that question, well, I just want to see what people are. Okay, well, why would you want to see what people would offer you? And you never know. They sometimes, and we've bought deals every now and then where somebody gave us a little hint that we could latch onto that all of a sudden led to a real conversation. And by the way, every time someone's low motivation, they're always giving you the superficial answer. Right. There's still some reason beyond that. And every now and then it can work out. Now, again, I would not say go find every low motivated seller and start asking that, because that would be time consuming. Right. But if you get that, it doesn't hurt to take a few seconds and ask that follow up. Well, I realize you're just fishing for offers, but why are you fishing for offers? What's inspiring you? But what's interesting is what we all know is everybody thinks that their house, their car, their guitar, their secondhand whatever, their fridge, anything that anybody's selling, they always think it's worth more than what people want to pay for it, right? Oh, but that's human nature.
It's human nature, right? Okay, so let's share with everybody your biggest loss ever in real estate.
Ooh, the biggest loss. Biggest loss ever was an absolutely beautiful home we built. It was over $1 million home, and I don't remember the exact amount, but I do know it was the biggest, gorgeous home. We sold it for, I don't know, 1.3, 1.4 million, something like that. And so why was it such a loss? Well, I'm not completely sure, because back then when we built it, we took some architect advice that, looking back, I'm not sure I would have taken. We tore down a house to build this gorgeous modern home. But when we went on market, one of the things I learned right away, we did like a couple of open houses. And it was probably close to 50-50. People either loved it or they hated it. So you would have some people go by, you know what, this is really nice. It's beautiful. You did an amazing job, blah, blah, blah. But we really wish you hadn't torn down the last house. And it was like this 2-story cottage house. And the main level was very classy. light,
Mm-hmm.
but the upstairs was like really weird. It like came out of Battlestar Galactica, showing my age, I know. But it was just really bizarre up there. White angles, like it was totally weird, totally contrasted with the downstairs. And we determined that the amount of work that was going to fix it was going to be too much. So it was better to tear it down and start over. Now, this was me going off my architect's advice. Again, what I didn't know really cost me. Because looking back, I actually might have just figured out the remodel. Because even if the remodel hadn't worked out and I did lose, it would have been tiny by comparison. But again,
how did you lose? You built a house, you sold it. How much money did you make?
So when we sold the house, when we lost, I mean, we literally lost money on the deal, so we didn't make a dime.
Oh,
but yeah. So I mean, it was a real loss. And
how much? I think it's good if people hear numbers so they feel better about their losses.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact amount, but I will tell you it was six figures.
Okay, so you lost about six figures.
Yeah, I mean, it was probably maybe around two, somewhere around there.
Okay, so you tore down a house, built a beautiful house, sold it, and lost about $200K because you couldn't get your money.
That's a rough number, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So why did it happen? Well, a couple things happened. The market demand for what we built was there, but it took way too long to build it. The house was actually over-engineered. We had to fire the general contractor twice. So we fired two. And a lot of times I ended up having to be the one to figure things out. I became a builder almost by accident because I would found that a lot of general contractors, let's just say they didn't live up to the standard. And because I do believe in quality. If you're going to do it right the first time.
Right.
And doing it right the first time, I also learned, some of the things they did, I would have to undo.
Right.
Because they cut corners. So now we have to go fix that. And again, I tell people a mistake in new construction is almost always going to be at least four figures. And if it's five figures, don't be surprised. So you made 5-10 mistakes, you're out 50 grand faster than you can blink.
Right. Okay. So you had a bunch of mishaps. You had bad contractors redoing stuff. Money was being pumped that wasn't supposed to be pumped. You sold, lost $200K. And what you realized after is you could have figured out re-engineering the current house and made a profit, correct?
Yes. I think the odds would have been better had we stuck to the original plan. But I didn't know what I didn't know. No. Right. By the way, when I did this project, I didn't have a coach.
Okay. Got it.
So I didn't have that person to tell me, Frank, slow down. We need to think this through. That person didn't exist. And the sad part is when I bought the deal, I got it for a good price.
Right.
I literally bought it. This is the part I do remember. I bought it $125,000 off list. That was the best part of the whole deal.
Wow.
That was what I bought it for. And people were like, oh my gosh, and this, but we got into it and then we fumbled because of ignorance.
Right.
Our ignorance caused us to fumble. And I didn't have that sounding board. Most of my sounding board at that time were my peers. Well, none of my peers had done anything like this.
Right.
So again, I wasn't in the right circles. I didn't have the right coach. So it's kind of like driving with a blindfold.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I'm sure that didn't feel great. Now, what was your biggest win?
I think our biggest wins, ironically, have not been new construction, but rather our buy and holds. Because yes, you can build a house, and so let me qualify that. Yes, you can build a house, you can do it right, and you can make good money and smile and be like, that was awesome. Yes, absolutely true. But there's just something really nice about buying a property right, holding it, watching it appreciate in value. And when you look at it years later and you're like, man, it's worth a lot more than it used to be. There's just a certain satisfaction to that I've
Right.
never gotten from a flip or a build.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the flip or the build, you have that high, you make the money, and right, but it's a moment in time. When you have a property that has a lot of equity and you can sell it now, maybe a week, year, 2 years. If the market goes down, no problem. You can ride it out. There's a certain peace of mind and satisfaction that comes from that that I've never gotten from a flip or a new. Now that's me. Somebody might be different. That's just me.
Yeah, I can
So
see
when you
that.
say, what's your biggest win? To me, those have been our biggest wins. Is there's just a peace of mind and satisfaction from not just one moment in time, but every if I want to think about it every day, man, that was a good deal. Man, and it's still a good deal. It's
Right.
still and every day, and it compounds. It's almost like compounding interest. It's like compounding emotion.
Right. Awesome. Okay, I love that too. I bought my first rental recently. Well, Frank, thank you for sharing all of that with us. I really appreciate your insights on real estate investing. I hope everybody enjoyed this. By the way, everybody, Frank is a real estate coach himself. If you want to reach him, all of his details will be in the show notes. But Frank, just so everybody can hear it, what's your website?
You can just go to my name, frankiglesias.com.
Perfect. So that's where they can find you. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you on the next show. Take care.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Business Wealth Impact Podcast, your source for empowering information and cutting-edge ideas from the world's top minds. I'm your host, Jeanne Omlor, founder of seven-figure coaching company, Jeanne Omlor International. Join me on a journey to unleash your potential and create your highest success. Welcome to Business Wealth Impact.